Welcome to the Locker Room podcast. I'm your host, Ciaran Deely, and I'm here with our guest, Ross Bennett. It's been a while since you've been on with us, Ross.
Yeah, it's been a while, kids. I'm looking forward to tonight, I have to say.
It's nearly like getting the crew back together again. We're just missing Joe Coulter.
Yeah, who's off around the world. So, yeah, we need to link up with him for sure.
Joe is in Hong Kong, so he's under lock and key with President Xi of China at the moment. So let's hope we don't say anything inappropriate that'll get Joe in trouble or anything like that. Okay, before we jump into the episode, which is on managers, head coaches, assistants, and selectors, what's the story? I just want to mention a reminder, really, of heading over to dsscoaching.ie. So essentially, as most people know at this stage, we're an online CPD service for Gaelic Games coaches. So hurling, football, ladies football, camogie, and on a daily basis, it's like having an assistant coach or resources given to you every weekday, and also part of a WhatsApp group and a community of practitioners and coaches. So head over there. There's membership, monthly and yearly membership, along with a really nice online course in sports performance coaching, and also some e-booklets of Gaelic football, some kickouts, some hurling e-booklets and everything like that. So do check us out. That's dsscoaching.ie. Okay, Ross. So as I said, it's the managers, head coaches, assistants, and selectors. What's the story? I thought we'd get us back together and have a chat around that, because obviously you've worked in the world of professional football and in the GA, and so have I have as well in football and Gaelic football and everything across different teams. So I thought it'd be good to have a chat about around this area. Can you just quickly and remind people, I suppose, of your experiences, and just in terms of like what clubs you've worked with and what sports, because I think it just gives a nice kind of feel for where you're coming from.
Yeah, sure, kids. I'll do this as quick as I can. And I haven't done this for a while, actually. Started off as an aspiring footballer, played in the youth system here in the UK, up until under-18s football. Played for a couple of clubs that were fairly local and, yeah, League One, Championship level now. Obviously, the pipe dream finished at some point, so went down the academic route, studied strength and conditioning, and then went on to study a master's in sports science and applied sports science with human performance. And alongside that, I took up a role at Chelsea as kind of like a movement coach, originally on an internship, and then just fell into a part-time job there, and ended up working across like assistant coach and like S&C sports scientist, movement coach, like covered loads of different things at different age groups. It was fascinating, really. Um, Got a bit of an opportunity then to go to Qatar. So I worked with the national squads. And again, I doubled up as an assistant coach slash kind of S&C coach for their 2000 age group as they prepped for the World Cup. Spent a very short time there, mainly personal reasons that brought me back to UK, and landed on my feet really when I got a job at QPR, which was like 10 minutes away from where I grew up. So definitely came back for family reasons. Obviously, that's where I met you, and when I walked in the door there 12 years ago. And I've been there ever since. So been in a multitude of different roles, worked with every age group from under nines all the way to first team at either physical performance level, sports science level, head of performance level, or technical coach, and been there for a long time now. Currently sit in a role head of integrated performance. So I've got my foot in both camps of first team and academy, oversee all the performance structures. And obviously along that journey as well, I picked up some additional work. One of them alongside you at London Gaelic, as head of performance there, and dipping my toe in with DSS and a few other bits. So definitely come at it from a performance and a coaching angle, and have kind of, I guess, overseen programs and a multitude of different staff from different disciplines, which I guess gives my insight slightly different to somebody who's probably specialized in something.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I thought it'd be good to have a kind of a chat, an informal chat and a discussion rather than an interview around this topic. We did say it's Friday night, we've got our glasses of red wine with us. Um, uh, I know this will go out on Tuesday morning first thing, but yeah, good to have a nice discussion on a Friday night.
Yeah,
Kind of
mine's going down nice, Kiers, I have to say.
yeah, me too. Me too. Okay, so the first area I want to briefly touch on, because obviously in the GA world, we're currently coming into the period of like new managers being appointed for intercounty, but also for club as well. And there's a lot of talk about now coaches under a manager. Like in the GA world, it's still there's a manager, there's either a coach, an assistant coach, or selectors, and then there'll be an S&C coach, and maybe a sports scientist alongside that. But it's quite traditional in its approach, and there's a lot of teams now appointing different people. In the last few years, the coaches have become as important as the manager, or maybe more important. Whereas up till the last few years, it was like just the manager and then the selectors alongside that. But I wanted to get your take just in terms of QPR at the moment. They've gone down quite an interesting route as regards management coaching, specialized coaching, and everything like that. And maybe actually before that, could you tell us the kind of typical football situation anyway? Because it is a little bit different in the GA tradition of just manager and selectors, let's say.
Yeah, sure, Piers. I think generally football's changing a little bit and kind of coming away from that kind of overarching manager who will literally manage every single thing in the club. I've been through a system where you've had managers who literally oversee staff like from any discipline and day-to-day operations around recruitment, around coaching, around performance, medical, everything was funneled into the manager. I think now people are realizing there are specialists in certain areas that can have really important decisions to make and need to have, I guess, the psychological safety to be able to make those decisions without falling under a manager who might have certain opinions on certain things. But I think it depends on the person you hire. So QPR have gone down a route now where they've got obviously a CEO, they've got a director of like sporting operations, they've got people to take care of recruitment, they've got people to take care of the run-ins of the club, and they employ a head coach who essentially oversees the first team coaching strategies with his coaching staff underneath. And underneath that, you've got assistant coach or assistant head coach. You've got an IDP coach in charge of the individual development of each player. They've got another first team coach who's actually in charge of like defensive coaching across the whole club. And people can go in and do their research on who these people are. But I think it shows that they're definitely moving in a specialist area. They've got a head of performance services who sits alongside myself, who essentially make the final calls around players being available or, have those conversations around load-ins and give them a little bit more autonomy and power within their specific area. So I think it works if you have really good specialist people in areas that are really good at their job. But obviously it takes people to want to collaborate and come together. I've worked with lots of different managers where this model wouldn't have been possible because managers want the oversight. So your recruitment of the head coach is really important, and maybe you miss out on a really, really good top coach because they don't fit the model, or maybe that top coach actually has limitations where they won't go that far because they won't listen to the staff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the route that the QPR have gone down, and I'm sure other clubs are following suit.
Yeah. So it's moved away from like your Alex Ferguson, Arsene Wenger, who basically manages like the whole club, in terms of nearly player recruitment and like the whole operation. And like, do you think it's as a result of just the club and the industry becoming so big that you can't put all of that on one person? And also, is there a thing about like that you hear a lot now about the club philosophy I nearly said manager, a head coach fitting into a whole system and a framework and a philosophy nowadays?
Yeah, I think nowadays, like the facts are that the turnovers of head coaches and managers they are a lot sooner. Like the average lifespan was 18 months going into this season. I think that's now dropped to 16 months for the average. So I think clubs are thinking for stability and making sure they have long-term succession planning. They don't put all their eggs in one basket with one person coming in. I think that's at play. And I think also they was recognizing that they're paying like other staff a lot of money. And ultimately those staff haven't got the tools and the ability to flourish because you're in the shadows of a manager or a head coach. So I think as I said, I think it's really dependent on who the hire is. Like you might bring in a manager type in a certain situation that's going to get a club out of a certain spot or difficult situation who can pull people together. But I think long term, I think clubs need to put in place where a head coach has a role of leading that first team strategy, but the whole organization has key people there that are going to be there for a period of time.
Yeah. What about, and I know this is specific to QPR, but I'm aware all the time that I think there's learning there. Like this is replicated in other professional football clubs, but like most of our audience listening or watching on YouTube, our channel, make sure you click subscribe, are in the GA world. And okay, it's not the very same, obviously. It can't be replicated directly, but there are lots of things that we can apply to the GA world as well. But like for instance, where you now have, and you mentioned briefly there about a kind of a defensive coach in QPR, which is not unheard of, obviously, but he has nearly responsibility, supposed to be anyway, from top to bottom,
Mm.
from men's to the boys' academy to the women. I'm not 100% sure the women's and the girls, and also like a head of goalkeeping as well, who like has actually worked across the both different codes, or let's say the women and the men's, and also the girls and the boys, and like has done, is not going to be there for every match, obviously, of the girls' academy or coaching, but like has run kind of coaching clinic nights in the training ground or on the first team training pitch under the lights in the meeting room out on the pitch, and it's really like brought everybody together across the club. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that's unique, but it is different, isn't it? It's a step along a continuum now.
Yeah, I would say in the football world, that's probably not been done very often at all. So I would say it is quite unique. There might be one or two occasions at different clubs that's happened. I think it's all about pathway. Like I think it's about adopting a business model. And if one of your biggest like business KPIs is to make sure you bring young talent that you've recruited at whatever age through to our first team, whether it be on the women's side or the men's side, there has to be an element of what does the top look like? And we have to have influence from top down. Otherwise, you're developing people for an ever-changing system or ever-changing manager that's coming in to play a different style. So the first team head coach or like one that's in place now definitely has reign to tweak the style, tweak the philosophy, depending on who they're playing and what players they got available. But I think there has to be some level of accountability of what we're trying to develop these players for. And I think that's what it's about, creating that pathway and making sure that we've got key things that we're trying to develop amongst these young players along their journey, that when they get close to the first team, they have the tools to be able to deal with what first team football likes at our club.
Yeah. And like, isn't that the proof in the pudding in some ways? Because, for instance, if a new head coach comes in and they play in a certain way, and that in the GA world or in the football world, and then correctly, the whole academy system, you know, takes that approach in that this is how we play, these are the type of players that we produce, and it might be very like expansive attacking football, and this is amazing, this is great. And then, of course, the head coach is gone, is sacked, the run of results are poor or whatever, and somebody comes in who's like 4-4-2, backs against the wall, sit back,
Yeah.
low block defense. And then, like, what happens then? Does your whole academy change the setup, and how long does it take to change that player profile and make them like train them in a different way? It like that's not sustainable, and like so that's why you've or QPR and other clubs have taken that approach of like this is generally our philosophy of how we play, and as you say, obviously it can be tweaked, and every manager is different and slightly different approach and needs results ultimately, and but in general there's that kind of a set philosophy, let's say, of that club.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. But I think it's also, it's also the job of the developer, and the top developers do this really well. They expose their players along the journey to different styles so that if they have to go into a 4-4-2 mid-block and be able to soak up pressure and, play on the counter attack, they can do that. If we want to go really high press and play 4-3-3 and be expansive and be open, exciting, they can do that as well. So I think it's definitely important to have a style of play that you're working towards, and we call it a methodology, a game methodology. But yeah, you definitely need the ability for your players to be adaptable depending on the system or what they're going into, the situation, or they get sold to another team. A team has to see something in them.
Yeah. Okay, that's an interesting one. So firstly, could you explain about that head of methodology and there's assistant head of methodology and stuff like that? Because in the GA world, that is certainly unknown, and I
Yeah,
think in the next few years it will start creeping in, like it always does, into amateur sports from professional sports. But also in terms of, like, it strikes me when I think of the GA world, I like there's a complete and utter disconnect between our first team, which is the senior team, the senior men's or the senior women's or whatever, and right down through the academy or development squads or the under 20s. Like, the odd time the senior coach will have input, down through the system, but won't really concern themselves with it. Like, in terms of the S&C and everything, the physical development model is probably better, whereby
yeah,
they've learned, let's introduce it at under 14s, under 16s, under 18s, 20s, and then maybe there's a bit of a disconnect between 20s and senior often, that they'll be sitting under a program, and then at senior level there'll probably be a well-known S&C coach, physical development coach, whatever you want to say, or sports scientist, and they like, okay, I'm doing my own thing, and you know, um, we need to get results and not worry. We can't give our time to the academy players and everything like that. And there are a few like Jason McGann down in Kerry, and you see up online the likes of himself and County Kerry doing lots of good work all through the system, and there's plenty others. But it does strike me that that's a step that we need in the GA world. But just could you aside from that point, could you
yeah, yeah.
explain about the head of methodology role?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like fairly interchangeable with like head of coaching or potentially technical director that are in some clubs. That person's role is to be independent to the head coach. Like the head coach will come into this person, but independent to the head coach, and will provide a framework from under nines all the way up to first team, really, and provide a consistent style of play or consistent methodology, as you say, to show that there's pathway and progression from certain age groups and all age appropriate. You're not going to have your under 12s playing the exact same way as the first team, but there's going to be principles that are embedded throughout. And that person's like the glue amongst the coaches. And key things, that person can get academy coaches into experiences with first team, prepping for first team games and making sure that they're around to see what it's like at the top end. And you can get people, like you said, head of defensive coaching, IDP leads, coaching clinics, masterclasses. You can get people, goalkeeper, all coming down to provide some services at certain underage levels to provide that pathway and that link. So, as you said, you've got head of methodology at our club. We've got goalkeeping for the whole club. We've got defensive coach. We've got my role, whose role is to make sure the performance structures are seamless from top to bottom, and we have the same processes. And we do have that methodical kind of step-by-step approach to stepping up to each team. So I think these people are the glue of the club, who have the foot in both camps and can support and guide staff and players to help that journey, really.
Yeah, yeah, and it's cool because, like, I've seen even as well that the head of methodology or the assistant head, in the academy or whatever, has the time to actually develop the coaches,
Yeah,
and the philosophy of play, and has time to do like CPD sessions, and because often like your coach or your manager or your head coach or whatever doesn't have time because like
yeah.
they're in the weeds of the team and preparing for training, preparing for matches, where that head of methodology character can kind of step back and oversee the whole
Yeah.
structure.
And that's important as well, Keir. Similar to my role, having the capacity to zoom out and to actually like work on staff development plans, work on how we're going to get this staff member better, how we're going to support this person, and have a zoomed out approach. And that obviously costs money to have people that aren't attached to teams.
Yeah.
So that's obviously a limitation in the Gaelic world, where things are different to the world I'm in.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. So that's the coaching structure and the kind of landscape that's there currently and previously with the manager and the head coach and everything. I just want to touch on or move on to then the the selectors versus the specialists. Now,
Yeah,
I want to get your take on this. So, for instance, you have a manager, let's call it, or a head coach or whatever, and then you got a range of selectors, maybe uh, maybe three or two, three, or maybe four, and the manager oversees everything. The selectors aren't, some are involved on the pitch, some are doing other jobs, and then when it comes to team selection, everybody gets an equal vote, and then majority wins out. So, everybody lays out their team for the big match at the weekend. It could be final or whatever. And then manager will get a vote, the coach will get a vote, the selector one, selector two, selector three, or whatever. And then whoever or whatever is the majority then wins out, and that player plays and starts and makes the substitution and everything like that.
well, yeah, I mean, obviously, I was involved with the Gaelic, so I kind of saw this firsthand, and that democratic style definitely happened with you as head coach. Look, for me, I think that it seems a bit old fashioned in terms of its name and its term. But like, if you have a zoomed out approach, there are, and we had it when you appointed your selectors, and like everybody had their skill set and their strengths. So like somebody would be more biased towards recruitment and having a look at players. Some would be on the pitch and helping out coaching because that's what they brought to the table. So I don't think it's as different as it actually is in football. I just think that the names are probably stuck, and that probably needs to over time evolve a little bit. That's probably what my take is on that.
Yeah, and like when we had our situation, we never actually had a majority rule in that, like, and I know we spoke about it previously at the time, whereby ultimately the manager or the head coach, like their head is on the chopping block.
Yeah,
They're appointed to this position or this job. Team does badly, they get the sack, or they don't, continue in the GA world or whatever you want to call it. And then, when things go well, the manager gets plenty of attention and probably too much attention, when they win and too much attention when they lose. And
yeah.
it really doesn't make sense that, if a team is being put out there and, for instance, the manager or the head coach may not agree with that team, like that's just madness in my
Yeah.
mind.
100%. And also, you have things like, especially in my world now, like club appointments. You have club coaches, and like at the end of the day, if there is a turnover in head coach or manager, those club coaches remain. So like,
Yeah.
the number one rule is one of the head coach's main jobs that nobody interferes with is if he has fit available players, it's up to them to make the ultimate call. And that's what it should be. You lean upon your staff. That's why you bring support staff in. That's why you have staff around you to help you make the best decision, or you think the best decision. But ultimately, as you say, it has to be down to the head coach. And yeah, and we'll talk about backroom staff and what I think on that a bit later. But yeah, the head coach has to have ultimate say on selection because, as you say, they live and die by that. If things go wrong,
Yeah, and I think it's good, obviously, to take everybody's opinion on board and knowledge and have a debate, have a discussion, and everything like that. You
yeah,
know, and then ultimately, like I read a book about uh, President Obama and how he worked the situation room, in highly kind of intense situation, was that get absolutely everybody's opinion, in the room then is left just the vice president and the defense secretary or whatever. They have an extra little bit of say, but ultimately then he's the guy who makes the decision, and he's the one that was put in that position to make those tough decisions, and that was what they went with. So then, leading on from that, Ross, from your own experience, you've worked with many different coaches and managers and everything, and without going into any individuals or anything, how do you find it works of the specialist coach versus like the kind of generalist coach? I'm thinking of, like, in some ways, Michael Beale was kind of, he could do everything. He was the manager or the head coach, but obviously a brilliant all round coach versus somebody who's like just focus on defense. And even, the modern way now of like set piece coaches, and it'll probably go more and more down that route. It might go to substitution coaches or who knows what next?
Yeah, good question, Kears. And as you know, like recently, I had an opportunity to potentially go in as a head coach as well recently. So this sort of topic's been really like on my mind around backroom staff. I think there's many different ways to do it, but I do think a head coach or old school manager maybe, and this is maybe where the transition is probably a generalist and has probably got a really good breadth of knowledge and understanding around general coaching, probably an idea of the MDT and can understand performance aspects, can understand medical aspects, can understand recruitment to a good level and what sort of player you want. But I do think the specialist route to support that head coach is the way to go. I think that head coach needs a couple of generalists like coaching staff in there who can take practices, glue the playing team together, can kind of fit in when needed. But I do think they do need some specialists, maybe somebody to take the back line, maybe someone to focus on the front line, maybe somebody, for, as you say, to focus on set pieces. Then you've got your support staff that are specialists. So you've got your goalkeepers, which have always been specialists. They were ahead of the time, actually, goalkeeper coaches. So I think as a head coach, you can understand and absorb everything because that's what you need to be able to make good decisions. But you've got 5 or 6 key people underneath you who can actually feed in like really intricate, detailed like information about their area. And then it's up to you to glue that together.
Yeah, okay, very good. Okay, and I know what obviously you had the opportunity to go in as a head coach in a football club, and yeah, you think differently then. You know, you start thinking. I remember with London, it was the same. You're building out a backroom team in your head, and
Yeah,
even I mean, we'll touch on it later, but you're also kind of over time, you're thinking about, okay, how do we freshen this up? How do we bring somebody in? How do we move somebody else on a different skill set? And we'll touch on that just in the last question. But yeah, it's really interesting. So just the last section, then I wanted to focus on building effective teams. And you touched on it there, so I'm not going to repeat that topic or that question. But in terms of your experience then of being head of a performance department and everything, like,
yeah,
are you looking to fulfill specific talents or tasks, or is it like, is the foundation kind of bringing in good people,
yeah.
who work together and look for solutions and um, answer performance questions, or what's your kind of first step? How do you build that out for anybody who's listening, who's like, we get questions from coaches in the DSS group who are going for a role of a head coach or manager, or have just got one, and it's like, oh sugar, okay, what am I going to do now? Am I going to
Yeah.
build out this department, let's say?
So I think let's leave the head coach one till after because I've got some views on, especially in probably the situation I was in is probably very transferable to the Gaelic situation in terms of part-time model and budget and stuff like that
Yeah,
and resource. But in my day job, I have to look at like a blend of skill sets within that department, and I've obviously got a varied budget for different levels within that. So number one is to make sure we have like probably two, I call them lieutenants, but 2 really top, highly skilled, experienced people who aren't necessarily going to agree with everything I say, but are going to be really specialist areas of physical performance and the medical side, therapy, physiotherapy. And these 2 people are going to drive contemporary practice. They're going to make sure like SOPs are in place. They're going to make sure we're operating at a really high level. And they've got the leadership skills to bring staff with them. So that's my non-negotiables, making sure we've got 2 really solid, and I've got 2 excellent people in post at the minute. Underneath that, then we need to fill the gaps of certain things. So we need people who are able to take stuff on pitch and understand football, but then I need people that need to understand science and really challenge the scientific rigor of what we're doing. So I need a blend of people. But the one thing that you need off every single person is that they can thrive in a high challenge environment where they're going to be challenged with high support. And with those 2 concepts, I think people will collaborate and align really nicely. Like we can't have mavericks going off and doing their own thing under 18 level when we've got a system in place from first team down. So everybody needs to buy into the way we're doing it. But then you have people that are clinically very good. You have people that can take like on-pitch rehab that are solid. You have sports scientists who can delve into the data. I've got S&C coaches who can coach. So I've got a mix of people. And amongst that group, then I've hopefully got enough skill set to provide the best service we can provide.
Okay, that's really interesting. I think you've covered a lot there, and I really like the thing about having your two key lieutenants, who have like are generalists, but who can kind of manage things and implement your or the department's philosophy on the ground, and then you can have your specialists kind of under that and fulfilling different tasks. What about what about when you say about the support versus the challenge?
Yeah,
That kind of like loyalty question. And that can be especially for a head coach or a manager, but also like for a performance department as well. Like, where's that line where it's like you want it challenging, but
yeah,
also there can be difficulties of a person staying quiet or saying one thing to the head guy and then
yeah,
going and talking to the players and saying, like, in terms of a coach, well, actually, I would have chosen you, or
yeah.
in terms of a sports scientist, like, well, I think actually you're the fittest and you should be playing more or whatever it is.
Yeah, really nice. So, a couple of things from that. So, Ben Williams, who's come in previously as performance director, has come back as director of sport and operations. Like, he is really big on like high challenge, high support. So, it's a mantra that we've adopted across the club. For me, every performance MDT, so amongst the performance team, it's like a courtroom. So everything we put up around individual player load-ins, IDP development, data from the game, training load, session plans, everything that's discussed in there, rehab, is your opportunity to challenge, check and challenge what's going on. But whatever happens at the end of that, we have to disagree and commit. So whatever happens at the end of that conversation, it's my role in this specific situation to choose a path we're going to go down. So I might have two or three people batting for one way. I might have one or two batting the other way. I have to absorb that info in that quick MDT and direct what direction we're going in. So even if you disagree, when that door opens, we commit to an aligned approach. And that's how we leave the door. So that when we go into our coaching MDT, this is the stance we're going to take to the coaches. Because if we have, as you say, if we have people that are saying certain things outside of that to another staff member, I don't agree with what we're doing here, or to another player, that's when the whole credibility of the department falls down. And that's what we build our credibility with outside of the performance MBT.
Yeah. Again, without going into individuals, have you seen in the coaching sense then, like, have you seen that happen, or do you have any kind of comment around that? Because obviously I don't want to speak about any individuals because
Yeah, of
I've
course. Look, yeah,
experienced it myself.
yeah. Look, so from a performance perspective, like I've worked really hard, and it's probably where my experience at the club comes in, like really handy here, because I've seen, even myself, I've been fully guilty of this under different regimes of not agreeing to a philosophy, physical development philosophy, and I probably haven't handled it the right way. Like that's given me the tools to know how I want the department to operate and act, and how I want to recruit. So that's been a big part in the recruitment stage, and I've seen it in coaching, like when I coached our under 15s and 16s as a dual role, like many years ago now, or 6, 7 years ago, I think our coaching team, who I worked with, worked so well because we operated under that mantra. We didn't agree all the time, but I understood he was the phase lead. And when we left our meeting or our discussion in the office, we disagreed and we committed to that. So, like, I think people have to realize where they are in the organization. And if you're not, unfortunately, in a position where you're making ultimate decisions,
Yeah.
then your job is to put your information forward, try to influence upwards, of course. But if it doesn't happen, unfortunately, you have to. And I love to say in like commit and disagree, like you have to.
Yeah. Plus, you did have Jisung Park with you as well for a
Yeah,
while.
yeah, I did. Yeah, and he took me out for lovely, lovely Korean, which was nice.
Brilliant. What a top guy. No, I really like that because obviously I experienced it myself um, in terms of London, and then I was involved with Wexford in coaching as well. And yeah, that can be it can be a difficult question and a difficult world to navigate, and especially when teams are winning, everything is rosy, everything is
Yeah,
great. And like as we often said before, sometimes winning kind of papers over the cracks of the problems underneath. But when you're losing all the time as well, it creates even more problems. And that's where like staff members, backroom team members start kind of thinking about maybe the future, maybe their relationship with important players or with other staff members, the succession planning and stuff like that. Do,
Yeah.
do you, just lastly then to wrap up, did you have any more thoughts about, as you say, like, when you're going for a head coach role or manager role in like the amateur world of Gaelic or like the kind of the part-time or casual roles in terms of football as well?
Yeah, good question. Something that I've had to think about recently. So I had very short amount of time to prepare some ideas and thoughts around what my backroom team would look like, as is the case. And because I haven't had a head coach role before, I haven't got a team. Essentially, I was starting from scratch. So as you know, like I picked the phone up to you. Like I had to think about if I can only take 2 to 3 people in with me that need to cover this program, which is probably realistic to the GA world, I
Mm.
need somebody who can have the breadth of knowledge of performance, but then I need people that can fill my gaps. So I think I'm, quite good as a coach. I think my energy and from a football perspective, I can coach a session and set up a team really well. I
Yeah.
didn't know non-league, so I needed somebody to come in from non-league who knew the circuit, had been there, played. I needed someone I thought who could glue the performance and the coaching together, which is why I rang you with your skill set. And I probably over time would have looked at expanding that coaching to go a little bit more specialist to run some IDPs if we had budget like down the line. So like I had to think a bit laterally about maybe it's not the best person for an assistant coach role, or in its truest form, maybe that person wasn't the best at like putting on a practice or setting a team up. But I'm in there to do that. But they could supplement me with, well, I'm the glue behind the scenes. I know what these players are going through. I can tap into their psyche. And that would fill the gap that I had in that area. So I think you have to go less specialist and more fill in your gaps.
Mm. Yeah, so you're kind of you need generalists because there are not enough staff members in the
Yeah,
backroom team, but obviously you need specialisms as well to kind of take care of this, take care of that, and yeah, I mean that's very applicable to the GA world because, like, I remember with London, we would have brought in, somebody to look at opposition analysis who's also a selector slash coach or whatever, somebody who's really good on the pitch. Obviously,
yeah.
somebody who can be a goalkeeping coach, but also has knowledge like across the board about, performance and just really good characters amongst the group and everything. And yeah, so there are different challenges, aren't there?
It's a big challenge. One thing I would say is like you see, they talk about people going on the merry-go-round and people bringing people in because they know them and they trust them.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I'm one for like obviously you need like unity, you need people to be together, but like you need to employ the best person for that role. Like, and I think that like not being worried about that person like thriving in that area and sometimes being better than you in a certain thing. I think that's the key. Like I think some managers and head coaches fear that, well, I might not employ that person because they might be better than me and maybe it will, but actually like you might need that expertise for you
yeah,
to succeed. So yes, you need good people. Like it's a big part of recruitment, but I needed someone, for example, who was the best in non-league football, who knew
yeah.
non-league. So I needed to get that person. So yeah, that was that. Yeah, that's my all-round take probably on that can apply to the GA.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's really interesting as well because the best person for that specific role,
Yeah,
and like managers get a lot of heat for kind of bringing their entourage with them from club to club. But like we've seen also whereby managers are kind of isolated, where let's
yeah.
say they take on a role in a club, but they don't have any of their people like in position. And it is important to have that kind of, that close friend or work colleague or somebody that you've kind of been with before who
Yeah.
will have your back, who you can bounce ideas off. And so like there's so many things going on. There's such a blend and a mix of people that you need.
So, like, just to fall back to QPR and do a bit of a full circle, like the head coach can bring in 2 staff. So
Mm,
it can be 2 coaches, it can be an analyst, it can be whatever it looks like, but he can bring in 2 staff. And as you say, like that's really important because when the pressure's on and it's really high pressure, you need someone sometimes just for a bit of support. And like am I doing the right thing? And be a bit vulnerable. Am I doing the right thing here? Like, do I need? And that's probably part of the reason, one of the reasons why I picked up the phone to you straight away, because
Yeah,
we've got that relationship. We've had the in the reverse order
yeah,
where, mate, do you think I'm going down the wrong path here? Like, talk to me and
yeah,
just be a bit vulnerable. You can't do that with people you're establishing relationships with professionally, like within the first few months. So
yeah,
that
yeah.
is important as well.
Yeah, I remember even like at times we were playing Galway in Ricelip in Championship, and you know, us chatting on the sideline, on the quiet, kind of going, okay, what now? Like we're 2 points down, we're right in this game, 10 minutes to go. Like
Yeah.
what can we do now to make a difference? And after games as well, just being completely open and vulnerable and kind of saying like what are we, are we taking the right road, the right pathway and everything like that. So yeah,
And at that time, like in my specific role, it probably wasn't looked at as you to come and ask me those questions.
yeah,
In the role I was in,
yeah,
he was there to physically condition the players. Like
yeah. Yeah.
traditionally, that wouldn't have been seen as before.
I remember Freddie Murray, who was a physio in QPR Academy, and he moved up to the first team, had a decent playing career, in kind of championship level and everything like that. I might be doing him a disservice. I can't remember exactly. But Harry Redknapp used to at times turn around to Freddie and kind of say during games in Loftus Road and elsewhere, like, "What do you think, Freddie? What now?" And he was a physiotherapist, but Freddie had different hats because he was a player, an
Yeah,
ex-player,
he
and
knew the game.
at that level, and also just that camaraderie, and knew as well that Freddie would just say things as he saw it. There
Yeah,
was no like sucking up to the head coach or manager or whatever. He'd say it in that kind of uh, brutally honest Irish way, and sometimes like that. So yeah, like having there's such a mix there of people that you need around you, I think, ideally.
for sure. There's no right way to do it, but I think you've just got to think bigger picture. Can you fill as many gaps as possible? And who's the best person to fill those gaps?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, great. I think we've answered the question of what's the story with managers, head coaches, assistants, and selectors. So thank you very much, Ross. It's been great to have you back on, and we'll have to do more of these, I think, over the coming months.
If our wives don't mind, we can call it the Friday night club.
With a glass of red wine. Actually, we might like have another little section on it about what type of wine we're drinking and what kind of bottles are good at the moment, what prices, and
If people are interested, for sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's see, let's see. Okay, thank you very much. Just a reminder to our audience on YouTube and also across different podcast platforms. Go over to our website, dsscoaching.ie. You'll see our coaching membership there and also some courses and e-booklets and different things that you can see. So thank you for listening. This has been the Locker Room Podcast.